It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
In the cage, where he's nice and safe.
Greetings, my friends. Welcome to another Rollin' Rambles. This one might get a little bit long, and if so, I'm sorry. I don't want to waste your time, and I don't think that it'll be a waste of time. There's just a lot of ground to cover. The problems with my childhood that weren't problems with my parents' childhoods. All the things that I wasn't given or wasn't allowed to have or was denied, or however you want to put it, that my parents and all of their parents before them usually were not only given, but in a lot of cases that was just the norm. Like, if you didn't give it to them, you were the weirdo. Anybody who's followed my material for any length of time can probably tell you what my thoughts are on free-range kids. I think that free-range kids is stupid. And by stupid, I don't mean that the idea of children being able to freely do what they want to do, explore the world around them, get around on their own and such, is stupid. I mean that the idea is stupid because it shouldn't even be an idea that can be stupid in the first place. Because that was the norm. It was always the norm. You would let kids just roam around. You know, your 10-year-old doesn't need to be sitting at home in front of a TV. And yet, we somehow have gone from my parents essentially being what they called latchkey kids. You know, just be home before dark. 8-year-old. They had all this freedom. They had this freedom in the 70s. They had this freedom during the most criminal time in American history. And the 1970s was brutal. There were more, per capita. There was a higher risk that one of my parents would have been the victims of a crime back in the 60s and 70s than there ever has been in my lifetime. We are living in one of the safest times ever, or at least we were up until COVID hit and Democrat governors and Joe Biden locked everybody down, closed schools, forced workplaces to close, and just generally shattered society, which, you get enough people who are unemployed and locked out of living a normal life, you're going to have higher criminality. And we're still suffering the fallout from that even today. The combination of increasing or basically endorsing criminal behavior. Oh, the summer of love in Seattle and such.
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the course of the night.
So since 2020, America's kind of gone downhill pretty bad, and there are certain people to blame for it, but that's not the point of this video. And the point is, even though things have gotten worse, they still are not as bad as it was, especially in the 70s. It was far more likely that something bad would happen to my parents or to their parents than to me or my siblings or my children. Because we have lived in a progressively more safe era. The internet and mass surveillance and body cams and all that, it's all a double-edged sword, but one of the edges on the sword is that if you have a body camera on every police officer, a camera in every car, a dash cam in a bunch of cars, everybody has a phone, there are a whole lot of things that would have gone very poorly for the person who was actually the victim, that now you do not have to worry about that. Because everybody has a camera in their pocket. And for some reason, just tangentially, I want to remark that I think it's very interesting that the same people that would whip out their cell phone and would think that, I'm going to whip out my cell phone at this, like karate class or whatever, those same people are the kind that would complain that somebody whipped out a camcorder and recorded the same class with their kid and all the other kids. And this is an actual thing that I had to deal with. I was filming an exam for someone, and they complained that I was filming using a camcorder on a tripod, but them and a bunch of other people were holding up their phones, recording with video. And it's just like, at some point, you've got to be smoking some serious crap to be that stupid. But the bottom line is that there's camera in everyone's pocket, and we're a whole lot safer because of it, because at least we can get video of things we couldn't before. And video can lie, there are ways to do that, but I don't want to get too far into those weeds. We have gotten, since the 1970s, progressively more and more safe for a variety of reasons. I was not afforded the same freedom by my parents that my parents were given by their parents. This is kind of the fundamental problem, but it gets worse than that. I was not only not afforded the same freedoms, like to, roam about, to bomb around on my bicycle, or hang out with friends or whatever, do extracurriculars. That's the other thing. I wasn't able to even do that. I wasn't even able to do things after school. Unfortunately, one of the things that I had to suffer through that it wasn't really a thing that we had a word for back when it happened to me, but I was parentified. I was turned into a built-in babysitter by my dad and my stepmom for my younger siblings. There was an hour overlap between when he wouldn't be back home from work yet, and she would have to go to work at night. And this hour overlap was enough time that, of course, I had the responsibility of making sure the other kids were okay. I mean, at the time, we are talking about my, we'll just call it my teenage years, but I can't remember the details exactly without doing a little bit of math. I was in charge of taking care of more than one sibling, and we'll leave it at that. And I do mean taking care of. I mean making dinner. I mean, giving them attention, changing diapers. I've done the whole gamut. You name it. There's only one of my siblings that I haven't had to change a diaper on. I was not given the ability to basically become a functioning adult because I wasn't allowed to do anything. And a lot of it stems from this notion that everything around us is dangerous. It's not just that my dad couldn't be asked to get off his ass. It's that everything around is some sort of danger. My stepmother one day, when I came home, she was going through my room, digging through everything, like she was the cops and I was some kind of criminal. And you have to ask, well, Jody, what did you do that was so horribly wrong that your stepmother felt the need to go through your stuff with a fine-tooth comb and try to determine whether or not you had done something horribly wrong? Well, I'm glad you asked. I didn't do jack shit. I did nothing wrong. What I did wrong was exist at a time and a place in history and have news exist at the same time. See, what happened, the real reason that I was treated like a criminal in my own home for a day is because my stepmother had seen on the news where those Columbine kids shot up and blew up the school. And so, in her own words, she said that this was a wake-up call, that, for parents across the country. And that's why she was going through my stuff. And I complained the entire time. And she did not care. So, look, I'm going to tell you right now, if I was going to be the sort of person that would shoot up or blow up the school or otherwise do something horrific like that, you would probably know a little bit ahead of time. It does give you a slice of life where the fear is what actually made everybody operate. In the 1990s, fear basically defined the population. We had the predator panic. That was the big thing. See, in the 80s, 70s and 80s, but mainly the 80s, we had the satanic panic where politicians and concerned religious parents and leaders of this, that, and the other all over society were deeply concerned that you might be worshiping Satan or doing non-godly things, to the point that they tried to use the government to force people to live the way they thought they should live. Gee, what does that sound like? Oh, every single era in human history, that's right. I mean, it's happening even today. But back then, it was not about the whole COVID lockdown thing and trying to force people to use preferred pronouns and all that. What was in vogue in the 80s was censorship and being afraid of people being non-religious, being ungodly, putting anti-Christian stuff in music, movies, TV, literature, you name it. And most of the stuff that people were worried about back then, that was it, the satanic panic. You can look it up if you want more information. But what I went through in my childhood was a combination of predator panic, where, there's a pedophile behind every single bush that's just waiting to, hop out and snatch you. He's going to get you, Johnny. Yeah, that bush over there, that's like pedo country. Oh, and there it is too. We're in pedo country. All the bushes are populated by pedos, especially if they're in a park, because no one would ever notice some guy standing behind a scraggly bush that's not maintained properly in a city park. Somebody was out to get your child every 5 seconds. Your child is going to be horribly maimed or beaten or, whatever. Take your pick. Any violent crime. Your child will be a victim. It's only a matter of time. Lock your kids up. And then on the other side of that, we have, oh no, your child's going to be the person who makes all the other kids victims. Look at Columbine. Oh, how shocking. Because school shootings never happened before the late 90s when Columbine happened. School shooting was not a thing before then. But oh no, a thing happened. One thing happened in one place in the news. So the entire country has to go into a small panic and lock everything down and treat everybody like crap and dump basic freedoms because, we feel unsafe. So I guess it's okay if we're abused as long as we feel safe. And that's the way that my parents were. And I didn't have any say in this. I knew that it was all stupid. So my response to her going through my stuff was to acquire an actual black leather trench coat. Thanks, Mom, by the way. Acquire a black leather trench coat and wear it all the time, every day to school. I didn't blow anything up. I didn't shoot anything up. I just wanted to make a point. Some guy who's weird wearing a black trench coat does not automatically mean that some guy who's weird wearing a black trench coat is going to do something bad to you. Funny story that came out of that, by the way, these 3 black kids that I had never met, and I say kids, but we're in high school, so, young adults, if you will. These 3 black kids said that they overheard me saying that I was going to blow up the school or something. I got brought into the principal's office, and he said, these 3 say that you said da-da-da-da-da. And I just started laughing. And I was like, that's pretty good. No, they didn't. I don't understand it. I don't know if they were racist or if they were just looking to screw with somebody or what. But if you've been keeping track, in a previous video I mentioned that some kid when I was in kindergarten on the bus called me a cracker. The kid was black. That's 2 incidents that I had that immediately come to mind where black kids said something, did something to me that other people didn't do. So that there's, while I'm not necessarily any more racist than the next guy, when stuff like that happens, you start noticing, and I'm pretty much the king noticer at this point. So I'm noticing some patterns. I'm recognizing them, and I've recognized them for a long time, and it really bothers me. But you know what? You know what was a pattern in the 90s? People didn't really get hurt, or bad things didn't happen to people any more than they did in the 80s. They happened less. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to hold me back. The catalyst for this video, for this discussion, that it's not something that a lot of you, I think, will have even heard of unless you're old enough. There's a show called The Wonder Years. It started in the late 80s and it went through the mid 90s. It follows Kevin Arnold, Fred Savage is the actor, through his journey through junior and senior high school. So it's basically a whole coming of age series instead of just a movie or whatever. Spanned about 6 seasons. The episode that bothered me was the episode where the family went up to like a lake retreat. They went on a lake vacation as a family. And Kevin meets this girl. And for some reason, Kevin and his best friend Paul, throughout the series, but in this episode in particular, they could just go. They could just walk out the door, go hang out with friends or whatever.
It was true I hardly knew these kids, and I just met this girl, and I had no idea where I was going. It seemed to me that was exactly the point.
And I realized throughout the show, as I'm watching them like late at night with people they don't know, their parents don't know where they are, they don't know what's going on, they don't know the people they're with, they're just roaming and making their own decisions. The oversight is very minimal. And I want you to keep in mind, this is a show made in the late 80s to early 90s. This is made during the era of the Satanic and Predator panics. But it's not a show about those times. It's a show about growing up in the 60s and 70s, especially the 60s. It's a show about the Vietnam War and just coming of age in that general era. It was a very different time. The internet didn't exist, and personal computers didn't exist. Things were very different. And the thing that really bothered me was that the other thing that was very different, and I know that my dad and my mom were able to have the kind of freedom I'm talking about too, from stories they've told me. But the thing that was very different is that they had this radical freedom to just do whatever. They could just do whatever they wanted, practically. And they didn't have to ask for the most part. Like they would sometimes have to be like, can I go do this, that, and the other? And I know it's a television show. I know that it's not necessarily true to real life. But at the same time, we're talking about something that at least is catering towards that generation. They wouldn't have put it in the show if it wasn't something that that generation identified with. They wouldn't have done what they did had it not had some degree of mass appeal. So while I know that some depictions may be unrealistic, the whole point of the show was to be realistic enough and situationally accurate enough that it made sense to a bunch of, basically Gen X and boomers. And that's my parents, My parents were, I think my parents were early Gen X or late boomer. But the whole point is that all this freedom that has been given to them it's not some sort of inaccurate thing. Like, they've got all this freedom because that's what they actually had. There were TV commercials, like at night, there were commercials that would be like, hey, it's like, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Because parents would send their kid, they just kick their kids out of the house and be like, be back, for dinner, or be back whenever. And some of them would forget. They'd forget that their kids weren't home. The TV would have to remind them that their children weren't home. That's how much radical freedom, that's how much freedom their generation got that I never got. Now let me tell you about my freedom. My mom wanted to do things for me, but couldn't, because she didn't have custody past about age 9 or 10. My dad, he didn't believe in things like autism and ADHD, although autism wasn't really like a big thing back then. If you were autistic, you were Rain Man. My dad, he didn't want to do the things. He didn't believe in the things, he didn't want to do things, he didn't want to do anything. My dad thought he was doing the right thing by building this big-ass house and being like, I'm building a future for my children. I built this house so that they can have a nice place to live and grow up and whatever. Well, Dad, the problem is that it doesn't matter if you build a nice house with all of your hard work and you save every last scrap, if I didn't get to do anything at all, and I'm like an emotional retard because of it. And look, I did reconcile with my dad after a lot of time of literally hating him. So, and he's dead now. So, and honestly, I would rather have him alive than dead at this point. So, it's not that my dad's some bad person. In fact, I don't think that any of this makes them inherently bad people. It's a social contagion. It's a social issue. And I have a feeling that I'm not the only person that was in my situation. So let me give you a good detailed description of exactly the problem. I will give it through one anecdote after I describe the general layout. My dad's house was a couple miles out of town. It wasn't a big town, but it was a town. I had various friends. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I did have a few. And there was no way for me to really meet up with them unless my dad or my stepmom, who I will just refer to from here on out as parents, my parents, because that's effectively what they were, was my full-time parents. There was no way for me to go and do anything without them taking me. Now, because I live in a somewhat rural area, the high school that I went to was like a 15-minute drive, I think, away from where we lived. So it's not exactly like I could go to the high school without access to a car. A lot of my friends that went to the same high school, they came in from a whole lot of different places. I don't want to get too specific, but, if I was 15 minutes away, well, there were kids that lived 15 minutes away from that school in the other direction that also went to that school. So we're talking about 30 minutes of driving radius there surrounding the school. There was no chance that I could hang out with half these people, but some of them did live where I lived. So it's not infeasible that I could hang out with people, that I could go do things, that I could go get a job even. The problem is, to do that, I would have to have some way to get there. Now remember, my dad doesn't get home until 5:30, I don't remember the exact time. But my stepmother had to leave at 4, if I recall correctly, or 4:30, to go to her job. So there's up to 2 hours where they're not there. And I'm supposed to take care of the kids. But here's the problem. Once my dad got home, why is it that I was not then able, once he's home and can take care of his children, that he didn't use a condom during sex and therefore had? You know, why is it that I can't go do anything? See, I had all these interests, but I couldn't do anything with them. I was lucky that I was in the men's chorus and could go to the few things that we, the few concerts or whatever they were called, performances. Maybe we did 2 a year. And honestly, I was lucky they even bothered with that. But it just seemed like if I wanted to do some sort of extracurricular activity, there's no way. If I actually wanted to be on a sports team, which I'm not going to lie, I might have had some interest. I might have even tried out. There were a bunch of people that said I could be like a linebacker or something. I don't know. But they were suggesting that I could probably do football. But there's no friggin' way that would ever happen, because guess what? Who the hell's going to take me to football? I'll tell you who. Nobody. Nobody was going to take me to football. Or whatever. It doesn't matter what I wanted to do, because there was no way. Because it was my responsibility to watch my siblings. But even ignoring that, what other options do I have? So one day, I gather up the courage to go ask my dad, who, by the way, both of them, if I got out of line, which was very easy to do, a little too easy to do, they would beat me with things, and we'll leave it at that. But let's just say I've been spanked with a PVC pipe, and we'll leave it at that. I got the courage to ask my dad, hey, can I maybe start riding my bike? I had a 26-inch mountain bike. Can I start riding my bike from here to town so I can do things in town? No, you'll get hit by a car. And that was the end of that conversation. Oh, driver's ed? Oh, they can't be bothered to, actually drive with me or anything. Throughout all of this, my mom got to see me every other weekend. Unfortunately, at the time, she drove a 4-cylinder stick shift truck, Ford Ranger. That's right, boys, Ford Ranger. But she drove a 4-cylinder stick shift truck, which for somebody who doesn't know how to drive at all already, adding that on top is just, oh boy, you want to learn to drive a stick shift in a Ford Ranger? Good God. I'm driving a Mitsubishi Mirage. This is easier to get used to than a Ford Ranger when you don't know what you're doing. But, and I'm glad that she tried. She really did. She let me drive, and she helped me learn. And I learned how to drive a stick to some extent, which turned out to be really useful later whenever some lady turned in front of me and ruined my truck. And I had to get a new vehicle, and that new vehicle was a used vehicle that my dad didn't want anymore, that didn't go backwards, and I had to pay for to get fixed. The Chevy Beretta, that's right, and said Chevy Beretta was a stick shift, so I had to, if I wanted to keep going, my new wheels was old wheels that didn't go backwards until it did, and I had to learn to drive stick. That was actually my favorite car, and I still wish I had it. The point of all of that is that I basically wasn't allowed to leave the house. It's not that they just outright said you're never allowed to do after school stuff. It's more that, I have to go to work. Oh, well, I won't be back from work yet. Oh, I have to do this. I have to do that. Oh, wait, you're asking me if you can ride your bike into town? So you're saying, like, in the evening or whatever, you want to be able to ride your bike to town and back so that you can socialize and so that you can maybe attempt to get a job and, weird stuff like that, of course, no 16 or 17-year-old would ever want to do. Oh, no, you can't do that. So it's not that they said I couldn't, it's that they basically said I couldn't. So because the distances were so wide, And because I couldn't go into town because, oh no, you might get hit by a car. Which, yes, it's a legitimate thing and it could happen. But I honestly would rather have gotten hit by the damn car than to be stunted the way that I was by not having access to anything. The thing that my parents did not give me that I needed desperately, and I think a lot of people went through this too, if you're someone born in the 80s or 90s, especially, my parents didn't give me access. They didn't give me the ability to access things. I could not access employment. I could not access transportation. I could not access extracurricular activities. I could not access social functions. The most I got was like the prom and 2 chorus performances a year. And there was one time that they let me operate the lights for the dance people. And the dance people actually were really nice to me, including some people that I thought were kind of dicks to me. Some girls that sort of had enough of me being an autistic weirdo. But yet, for some reason, when I interacted with them more, like we were put together by this dance thing, they actually got used to me and were nice to me. And I was able to get along with normal people. And they were actually really happy with the job that I was doing for them with the lights. You know, I had these glimmers, these little slivers of hope that I might be able to break out of my shell and access a social life, and, you know, gainful employment. And there's a lot that to be said for employment, because what comes from employment? You have a job, you have money. What can you do with money? Here's an example. Maybe not the best example, but here's one. I was in school. I might have been in middle school, you know, like 8th grade. There was a CD that all the other kids were listening to, but I wasn't. It was whatever the latest Bloodhound Gang CD is. We don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn, burn, motherfucker burn. That one. I don't remember what that one was called. I think The Roof is on Fire. That's the one.
The roof is on fire. We don't need no water, let the mother...
That's the name of the song. But I never got to listen to that disc. And in fact, I didn't even get a copy of the song until about a year ago. Yeah, about 20 years late. 25? Somewhere in that vicinity. There was a song everybody was into at school. They just keep on, you know, repeating the lyrics and shit. And there were these guys that wrote down the lyrics to that Batman Forever Method Man song, The Riddler. Yeah. And they had me just rap it. And for some reason, like for 2 seconds, I was like a little celebrity there, because they had me just, I had never heard this before. They just wrote it down and they said, just do it. I'm like, I don't know the song. It was like, just do it anyway. And I did it, and everybody cheered for me. And for somebody who's so friggin' socially awkward, to have everybody just like, yeah! And I wasn't doing anything terribly special, but that was just like a jewel of a moment. But the problem is, I would never have access to that. I would never have access to any of these CDs. The only way I got access to some of the music that defined my generation outside of the radio and recording it to a cassette tape off the radio was, there was this, I don't want to go too far into it, but there was this thing where you could basically pick albums, and you pick them by putting this like stamp into a little card. You mail the card off, they mail you the CDs, and then you have to pay for them later. And when the bill came, my parents got pissed off and wrote them a note back saying that I was a minor and that they weren't going to get paid, and never heard from them again. Probably wasn't the best thing ever, but I got 10 CDs, and I may still have them, actually. I know that at least a lot of them I had for a very long time, but I listened to those CDs so much that if they could wear out, they would have. And that's the thing, is I only got access to the culture by doing something that frankly was not, it was the equivalent of like stealing bread. If you could take like Aladdin stealing bread, but make that access to your culture, there you go. Because, yeah, you know what? Not being familiar with those things, it means that you don't fit in so well. And I already had enough trouble fitting in. I mean, if you've watched these videos, you know, while I am capable of talking to this camera very nicely, while I seem like I'm pretty good at doing the whole social thing, the truth is, I was weird. I was really weird. I didn't know how to act. Autism is a hell of a drug, and it bit me really hard. You know, I didn't know how to deal with anybody properly. And I always just kind of felt like, what did I do? What did I do wrong? I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And granted, you know, I'm an adult. I've been an adult for a while. I kind of figured it out. And that's the only reason that I am the way that you see me today. But man, you know, you talk about like guys acting creepy or whatever. I was peak that. I was the weirdo, the creep, the freak, you know, you name it. These little slivers would fall into place where it's like, hey, here's a rope. If you climb up this rope, you might be able to level up on the path to social acceptance and so on and so forth. You might be able to grow, except I never got access. And that was the whole problem. When Napster became a thing, as soon as I found out about Napster, rest assured nobody could call the house. Because I had that damn dial-up internet on all the time, overnight, whatever. I would split MP3s, 96 kbps MP3s, onto floppy disks. 4 floppies for a song, for example. And then take them downstairs to my computer and shove the 3 floppies in sequence to merge the splits back together. I was using like a PK zip or something. I can't possibly tell you how many things I did this way. At some point, I think I actually used my parallel port zip drive that I got my hands on because my mom spent way too much money on it. I told her I only wanted that and nothing else for Christmas. And one year I got it. I didn't have a computer, but I had a zip drive I could plug into someone else's, and 100 megabytes I could take with me at a time when it was still kind of hard to get that in a cheap computer. It was amazing. But this is the thing, is I had all these little things that sort of gave me a little bit of a step up. Napster gave me access to more culture. It gave me access to songs. Whenever somebody would talk about a song, I could go to Napster and I could look it up and see if I could grab a copy of the song. You know, I could do all kinds of stuff like that I could not do before. That Bloodhound Gang thing, I just realized I didn't finish that story. But they were all talking about it. I somehow got my hands on enough money to buy the CD. I walk in the store. You know what the lady at the fucking CD store says to me? She's like, you're not old enough to buy this CD. You got to come back with a parent. And I'm like, I'm here. I'm going to buy the CD. If you don't want my money, then I'll just leave. And I left. Because she wouldn't sell me the CD because of the stupid rating. No, you got to have your parent. Screw you, lady. I'm walking around in Chapel Hill by myself. I think if I can walk into your stupid CD store, I think if I've got that much independence that you can sell me a CD that says some naughty lyrics, and you'll get over it. But that was the thing. That was how bad the censorship really was back then. Anyway, so the bottom line is that through combination of fear and laziness, my parents managed to do all the wrong things. And what the whole problem is, what they valued was not what I valued or what I needed. That really is the most important thing. What you need is not necessarily what makes you feel good or makes you feel safe or makes you feel happy. What you need often is uncomfortable and shocking and is quite the experience. If you don't get it, then you don't grow. There is not a single person on this planet that ever grew by not making mistakes. Because the only path to success is through failure, and a lot of it. Failure is how you learn what success is. Your failures are how you learn the definition of success. You can't accomplish something if you don't try it first. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you're bound to fail. But through each failure, you figure out why you failed, you refine your approach, and you try again. It's not working out for me with motherboard repair right now, but for a lot of other things, that has been exactly why I've learned all the crazy things that I have. Because I would siphon up whatever I could get my hands on like a sponge. I'd suck that information dry. My parents didn't give me access to social life, to culture, to funds with which I could further my access to social life and culture. And because of this, I stagnated. And that's really, that's kind of the part that hurts the most, is thinking about how much of my life was wasted. And for a very long time, I've known that my entire upbringing was not right. It was not good enough. That there was something, I always hated my teenage years, and really even a lot of the years before that. I look back on them with almost universal hate. And it's not too strong of a word, because it's not regret. It's just, I'm very angry, and I'm not angry because, like, I inherently just hate my parents or something really awful happened to me, so much as that I wasn't allowed to grow. Because if I'm allowed to go and potentially make a mistake, oh, someone might kick my ass. Oh no, something bad might happen to me. And if something bad happens to me, well, that's not safe. So we got to keep them safe. Also, it just happens that saying no and not letting him do anything is not only going to keep him nice and safe, but it also means that I don't have to expend any effort to do the other thing that's not safe anyway. And I can justify this to myself by saying that it's not safe. You know what? Let your fucking kid get hit by a car on his bike. All right? I feel the need to wrap this up. The whole point, the bottom line, the end of the story, I love to use these cliches, haven't you noticed, is that I wasn't given what I needed when I was growing up, and I'm sure a lot of other people weren't either. And it's because my parents' generation, Gen X or early Gen X, late boomer, they were just they were a combination of lazy and entitled and afraid, because they were so afraid of what might happen to me, and because it would require them to expend some effort, they wouldn't give me basic things I needed to grow as a person. And I've suffered every year of my life since because of it. And that's really the takeaway from this. Like, arresting parents because their children are allowed to walk home from school at 10 years old. That's stupid. That is incredibly stupid. The mere fact that somebody was paying enough attention to them walking to call the cops and tell them that, oh, there's a kid walking with no parent, well, that should be enough of an indication that they're being watched as they go home by other adults on the way. And if something bad happened to them, there's a good chance that it would be witnessed. That's probably the ultimate irony in that whole thing. You know, you need to give children freedom. You need to give children access to social life, access to culture, and access to outside activities. You can't learn something you don't know exists. If you're not exposed to something, you never have the opportunity to find out if you like it and potentially grow in that field. And this lack of exposure, and honestly, I think it's what separates, at least one of the things that separates, poor kids from successful kids. It makes for a really bad time when you're an adult and you just don't know anything, and you've never experienced anything because you just were never allowed to. You were never granted access. They don't have to just struggle for the rest of their lives. They don't have to just sit around thinking, well, I can't do anything, so I may as well not do anything. Because that's what ultimately ended up happening to me. I had a hard time leaving the house because I just couldn't do anything. So I got used to the fact that I just couldn't do anything. And so anything that I thought I might be able to do, nope, can't do it. Just can't do it. And it's sad because think of how many opportunities I may have missed out on because the only thing that I thought I could do was go to school and stay at home. Because anything else, I just had to assume by default the answer was always no. All right, that's enough of that. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that crap. I hope that I haven't wasted your time. Take it easy.